Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Joshua Bell is one of the best violinists in the world. He was 4 years old when he started taking rubber bands and stretching them out around his dresser drawers and using them like strings to pluck out classical compositions. And he would adjust the pitches by pulling the drawers in and out. Back in 2007, as an experiment, he showed up without any publicity at a Washington, D.C. metro station and started playing his violin. He had just sold out a theater in Boston 2 days before. And when he got permission from authorities to do this, he was told the crowd might get a little out of control. They were worried that people were going to, congregate around him, and that it would cause problems in the flow of people moving through the station. But he brought his 1713 Stradivarius violin, which is worth millions of dollars, and he began to play 6 of the most beautiful songs for violin. And one of the greatest violin players, playing one of the greatest violins in existence on the planet, producing some of the most amazing sounds that can be heard. It was the kind of performance that even someone who's not a lover of classical music would be able to appreciate. But in playing for 45 minutes, only 6 people stopped to listen for any length of time. Some gave money but continued walking without appearing to actually listen to the music. One 3-year-old boy pulled on his mother's sleeves to stop, but everyone just kept moving. They had other things to do. They had a focus and a vision that didn't allow them to see or hear this thing of beauty right in front of them. His time there was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, and priorities of people. The questions were, in a commonplace environment at an inappropriate hour, do we perceive beauty? Do we stop to appreciate it? Do we recognize talent in an unexpected context? Our gospel for tonight is the story of the 10 lepers. There are a couple things I want to note about this story. Number one, Jesus is at a border. It's between Galilee and Samaria. It's the dividing line between Jews and Samaritans. For Jews, the borders represented the line between themselves and people who were spiritually unclean, people they were to keep away from. Jesus is literally taking his disciples to the edge. And then secondly, when Jesus sees the 10 lepers, he tells them to go show themselves to the priests. And the only reason you would do this is if you were healed of your leprosy. So even though Jesus hasn't said you're healed, he's effectively saying it's a done deal. Going to the priest was the spiritual ritual set up for a person with leprosy to be readmitted to society. Otherwise, they had to stay at the edge, at the sidelines in society for fear of passing on the disease. The priest would examine them and ensure they no longer had it. It was part of their duty to go to the priest. So as the 10 are leaving to see the priest, we hear that they're all healed, but one leper returns. Why? You could try to imagine his inner state of mind and come up with all kinds of answers for what moves a person to be more thankful than someone else. But there's really only one thing you need to know about this man that's different. It's the only detail we're given in the story about him. He's unlike the other 9. He's a Samaritan. He's a foreigner. And he doesn't follow the same purity laws and rituals. Maybe because he doesn't have a priest to go see. A Jewish priest wouldn't welcome him. He has nowhere else to go. He has no duties to fulfill. He's a free man. So where does he go next? With all options in front of him, he returns to see Jesus, and he thanks him. He has the time and space in his life to see an opportunity right in front of him. The response Jesus gives seems to be maybe a bit of an indictment on the other 9, but that's kind of strange since they're actually doing what Jesus told them to do. Go and see the priests. What Jesus is doing is making a point to those around him. See the difference? The irony is that the foreigner, the one who's not bound by all the codes and rituals, is actually freed for true devotion. The story reminds me a lot of the story of Mary and Martha. You know, Martha preoccupied with all the duties of hosting. Mary feels freedom to engage in relationship with Jesus. What the 9 do isn't wrong. They actually do what Jesus tells them. And in fact, because they believe what Jesus said, when they begin on their way to the temple, their faith brings them healing. But they miss out on the deeper reality before them. They have the opportunity to thank the Messiah, but instead they spend that time focused just simply on getting things done, doing. Our instinct is to say that you can do both, and they often flow into each other, and I believe that's right. But sometimes maybe it's not. Sometimes we need to make choices, and the Samaritan had the freedom to make the right choice, and it's that simple. Thanksgiving is a holiday that affords us some extra time to spend with family and friends, or to simply pause and reflect on our own, to look for the little moments around us that might be big moments, world-class talent that we're walking right by. One of my ongoing reflections about the world as it is today is that so much more time and skill goes into creating amazing experiences by millions of people every day. On one hand, it's amazing. There is incredible talent, art, performance, design, communication, information, viewpoints that all of us can have access to all the time, on demand. It's such an incredible gift. But because we're bombarded with so much, we're likely only to pay attention to the people who are familiar to us and that we already know about, or the ones who are the biggest and most bombastic. We can easily miss the music playing in front of us that's unfamiliar or that we're not expecting. Thanksgiving, perhaps, is a time to simply pause and open ourselves up to a wider range of the beauty around us and realize how blessed we really are. How amazing life really is. How fortunate we are to be living in this moment. And when we realize that, all we really need to do is simply return for a moment to God and say thanks. Happy Thanksgiving. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.